In this lesson, I'm going to give you the basic instructions for a specific form of mindfulness meditation called Zazen, which literally translates to seated meditation. I'm going to give instructions as if you were doing this while sitting in a chair, but if you prefer to sit cross-legged on a cushion or sitting on a seiza bench, this is perfectly fine as well. We start by placing our feet on the floor with our knees at a 90-degree angle. Sit up tall or stretch up and settle in. Lift the shoulders up and let them relax back and down. It might help to rock side to side, gradually coming to rest in what feels like a centered position. Then do the same thing forward and back to make sure that you are truly centered. We align the spine so that the skeleton can maintain the posture and the non-essential musculature can relax. A traditional pointer is to feel like your head is attached to a string, like a marionette, and is being suspended so the rest of your muscles are free to melt and relax down. Alternatively, you could picture your head being filled with helium and floating lightly above the body. Tilt your hips forward just slightly to create a small natural curve in the lumbar region of the spine. If you need to, it's perfectly fine to place a pillow behind you for support. Many of us have a kyphotic posture from being hunched over in our jobs or spending hours on electronic devices. So it can help to make sure that the chin is slightly tucked inward so that the head is properly aligned over the spine. If it's too far forward, the muscles of the neck and back will tense up and you will quickly feel a lot of tension and pain. If you notice discomfort across the back, particularly around the shoulder blades, try pulling your head back and see if that relieves it. Open your shoulders, feeling a nice spaciousness in the chest so that you can breathe freely. If we're hunched over, our breath becomes shallow and constricted. Jonathan Kabat-Zinn has a lovely phrase urging us to adopt a posture that embodies nobility. We're not striving for a feeling of superiority, but rather emulating the calm and dignified posture of a stone statue. It might help to picture yourself as a silent, noble mountain. Generally, we keep the eyes slightly open, half-lidded for this practice. If that's uncomfortable for you, you can close them, but be aware that closing your eyes can make it easier to get lost in thoughts, daydreams, and to actually doze off. If you find yourself getting sleepy, open your eyes and even lift your gaze up towards the ceiling for a few moments. If you keep your eyes open, gaze gently at the floor 2 to 3 feet in front of you. Keep a soft gaze, not like you're looking at a speck of dirt, but rather in a way where you can see the film of fluid floating in front of your eyes. If that doesn't make much sense to you, you can try to take a more panoramic view, including an equal focus that includes your peripheral vision as well as the center. If possible, it's best to breathe in and out through the nose. We keep the mouth closed, but the jaw relaxed. In order to keep the mouth comfortable without getting thirsty or needing to swallow too frequently, we place the tip of the tongue gently against the back of the upper front teeth. If you would like to, I suggest putting a tiny smile on your lips. If you've ever seen a statue of a meditating Buddha, you will notice that there's always a small upturn on the corners of his mouth. This feels really nice, and it reminds us to take our practice sincerely, but not too rigidly and seriously. Meditation should be enjoyable, not a chore or a duty that you have to grimace and bear for the sake of your health. The last part of the posture we need to talk about is what to do with the hands. Traditionally, Zazen uses what's called the cosmic mudra. In this position, the fingers of your non dominant hand will rest on the fingers of your dominant. Your thumbs will lightly touch, maintaining a pressure just tight enough to hold a piece of paper in place between the tips and no more. You then place your hands in your lap, palms up, and you are all set to begin. If this is uncomfortable for any reason, feel free to place your hands either face up or face down on your knees or thighs, wherever they are most comfortable, and improve your ability to remain still. Now that we have our posture, our entire practice in Zazen, at least at this point, is to count the breaths as they come. We can expand the depth and scope of the practice with time, but this is sufficient to start. To begin with, it can be useful to take 3 deep breaths to calm the nervous system and settle in. But after that, you are not trying to control the breath in any way. There are meditations that do alter breathing patterns, but Zazen isn't one of them. You don't need to assess the quality of the breath, whether it's shallow or deep, fast or slow. Just be aware of it simply as it is. A helpful analogy I've heard Sam Harris use is to be an impartial mirror reflecting the breath. You can focus on the breath anywhere that the sensations are the most obvious for you. That may be at the tip of the nose where you can feel the air entering and leaving. It might be deeper inside the nose or down the windpipe, or maybe it's the feeling of the chest or belly rising and falling. If you are breathing deeply into your stomach, try focusing on the spot a couple of finger widths below your navel. This is a traditional place to anchor your attention for Zazen. Any of them will work for now. It all comes down to where you can be most aware of the sensations. And remember, wherever you choose, accept the breath without leaning towards it or invoking any sort of internal posture attempting to move closer to it. Passively accept and welcome the sensations. That is all. No straining allowed. The reason we focus on the breath is that the breath is always with us. Some practices focus on a candle flame, a statue, or any other object, but the breath is easily portable and something we can tune into anytime, anywhere, day or night. The other important factor about the breath is that it's always in the present. Our thoughts very often whisk us away to the past or the future, but the breath can only happen right now. When we're feeling anxious, it's because we are predicting a possible future situation. And when we are feeling depressed about things that have happened to us or ruminating on things we regret, we are visiting the past. The breath anchors us firmly to the now. To clarify, our meditation object is technically the sensation of the breath wherever you feel it, not the actual breath itself. It's a subtle distinction, but important. This means you don't want to visualize the place in the body that you are focusing on. It's easy to conjure up images of our nose or our belly, or even to see the breath moving from outside of the body all the way into our lungs and back out again. Let go of all of that. Only focus on the specific sensations related to the breath in the moment. Similarly, you don't need to direct your eyes to the place in the body where you are focusing. For instance, if you're focusing on your abdomen, you don't have to point your eyes way down into your stomach, though you might find yourself unintentionally doing that. Just feel the sensations as clearly and vividly as possible. In order to pay attention to the breath, we use a simple counting method. There are many variations you could play with as your concentration power increases, but we'll start with the one which will give you the highest chance of successfully staying with your breath. When you inhale, you will count 1, and when you exhale, you will count 2. You repeat like this until you hit 10, and then you start over again. You don't need to count out loud, just quietly note it in your head. Some people also find it helpful to visualize the number at the same time. Some people count it at the beginning of each inhalation and exhalation, while others find it more helpful to extend the number all the way till the end. This can be beneficial, especially for beginning meditators. Pay particular attention during the gap between the breaths, especially after the exhalation ends. These are the places that are most likely for thoughts to intrude, because the mind, which has been tasked with watching the breath, feels like its task is complete. So be vigilant there. Extending the number all the way to the end of the breath keeps you connected all the way through without letting the mind find a new shiny task to occupy itself. An alternative to this is to start counting in the gap before and after the breath has begun or ended, rather than when you actually start feeling the sensation. That fills the gap with something purposeful. Don't be discouraged if you don't make it all the way to 10 before you get sidetracked in a thought train and completely forget that you were supposed to be counting. That's perfectly fine and completely normal. When it happens, just come back to 1 and start over. Another thing that often happens is that you continue counting and get to 20 or 30 before you realize that you were supposed to have stopped at 10. If that happens, just come back to 1 and begin again. Though it may sound like it, we aren't actually attempting to control the mind. All we are really doing is setting the intention to watch the breath. And we are constantly resetting that attention every time we forget. Trying to actively control the mind just leads to unproductive tension that will end up defeating the purpose. Again, thoughts will arise, and that's perfectly normal. It's the way the brain works. It's not a problem, and like we've discussed, definitely not a disqualifying factor to keep from meditating. When thoughts arise, we have a helpful mnemonic called the 4 R's. Bhante Vimalaramsi extends this to the 6 R's, which I'm also quite fond of and will share next. The 4 R's are recognize, release, return, and repeat. This means we recognize the thoughts. This may come as soon as they arise, or it may come 10 minutes into a swirling thought tornado. The next step is to release them. We don't judge the thoughts or ourselves for getting lost in them. We don't try to force them away or engage with them. We just let go of them. Treat them like clouds floating across the sky. They aren't hurting anything, they're just passing through, leaving no trace. In fact, it can be helpful to actually celebrate any time that you catch yourself thinking. You aren't celebrating the fact that you got lost in thought, but that you had a moment of waking up, a moment of recognizing that you strayed from your task. Once you've recognized and released the thought, you return to counting the breath. Simple as that. And the last R is to repeat, because I promise you this will not happen only once. Our whole purpose here is to train the unconscious mind by repeatedly performing specific tasks over and over. So repetition is key to the development of these habits and skills. Now, I mentioned the 6 R model, and I'll briefly talk about the other 2 R's in case you would like to utilize them. You still recognize and release the thoughts, but the next R in this model is to relax. It's a helpful reminder to not get self-critical and judgmental that we have gotten distracted. Take that moment to release any feelings of physical tension you might notice, and let those negative thoughts relax and dissolve with it. The next R is to re-smile. Along with the relaxing, you put that small smile back on your lips, which gives a little boost of positivity to the body and mind. Then, of course, you return to the breath and repeat as necessary. And that's it. I will now ring a bell, and you may sit and practice for as long as you would like. Enjoy.